So, what are the homeworks? Well, every week, except this week because we only have one class and we don't really have time to cover much, there will be homeworks on Blackboard. Who has never used Blackboard? Everybody's used Blackboard. Good. So you will know that it sucks, but at least you know how to use it. Yeah, every week I will post a homework that will be out of 40 points on the material that we have covered that week, and you have from the time that I post it until the deadline, which is the following Tuesday at 10 p.m. I will usually post it either on Thursday or Friday of the week, and then and then you will have until 10 p.m. The next Tuesday. So in other words, there will be another class before it's due. Don't leave it until 9 p.m. on Tuesday to open it. Here's how it works. You only have one attempt if you submit the answers. So if you submit the answers, you are done. However, there is no time limit. You can open it the moment it is posted, leave it open, turn off your computer, come away, and go back to it as many times as you want. But it is only submitted when you click on the submit button. In fact, let's illustrate. There we go. All right, yes, so Blackboard, this is not the Blackboard for your class because there's been a problem with that and it isn't properly set up yet. This is the Blackboard for when I taught this class, so this is for 2013. But it will look something like this. You will have these buttons, and the important button is homework. So you click on homeworks, and you will only see one homework. I can see all of them because I'm the guy who sets them up. But you will see an example of a homework, and you will click on it like this, and it will give you instructions. And then you click continue, and then you'll get a set of questions, usually multiple choice, not always, but that's common. And you just click an answer and click save answer, or you can just go through and click all the answers if you're feeling confident. But the important button is save and submit. You can save all answers, which means that you can then turn off your computer and come back and it will have saved your work. And if you do not save and submit, it will automatically submit it anyway at the deadline. So you can do, you can do one question, go away, have a meal, watch a few Simpsons episodes, come back, and it'll be there. But this is the final button. When you press this button, you are done. You can't do it again. It will immediately tell you your grade, at least in the early quizzes. In the later quizzes, there'll be stuff that I have to grade myself, so it won't tell you your grade immediately. But it won't tell you what questions you got right and what questions you got wrong until after the deadline. After the deadline, it will then tell you what questions you got wrong and what are the right answers. Obviously, it doesn't tell you that before the deadline because you could tell somebody else. So that's what the homeworks are like. So I would recommend looking at it as soon as it's posted, because it doesn't matter. It's not going to, no time starts, no clock starts ticking or anything. Nothing will affect it. So don't just leave it until the last minute to even look at it. Look at it, and then you will know if you understand the questions. If there's some questions where you have no idea what they're asking, well, there's another class you can ask me, or you can email me, or you can ask Eric, and we can, tell you what you should be doing. Okay, so that's the homeworks. There's one of those every week. I count the best 10. So that means if you miss one entirely, it won't affect your grade, so long as you do at least 10. There's going to be more than 10, and if you do 10, I will count those 10. If you do all of them, then I count the best ones. So you can screw up a couple of weeks, you can miss a couple of weeks, and nothing bad will happen to you. But for this reason, I don't allow makeups or extra credit. I don't even know what the words extra credit means, so don't try and explain it to me. Don't ask me about those things. This is the nearest you're going to get, that you can screw up a couple of quizzes and it won't affect your grade. All right, so each of those 10 is worth 4% of your final grade. Added up, that's 40%. The remaining 60% is the exams, the midterm and the final. Now the reason why it's weighted that way is because I know this wouldn't be you, but in theory it would be possible to cheat, perhaps, by working together or have somebody else answer your questions online, whereas this will not be possible in the exams. They will be in-class things. But even if you are desperate and you're doing badly on the homeworks, I advise against cheating because unless you have struggled with the material and have at least some idea of how it is, you're going to fail the exams anyway, and you can't pass the class if you fail the exams. All right, so midterm and final, they'll be, I'll give you a sheet of paper and I'll give you the quiz and you answer on the exam. That's what the exams will look like. There'll also be a Scantron component. Does anyone not know what a Scantron is? They're becoming more and more outdated pieces of technology, but you're probably still familiar with them. You can get free Scantrons from the library and from the Office of Student Life. Or you can buy a pack of them for like 25 cents from the bookstore. All right, so that's going to be what makes up your grade. No papers. That's one of the great things about this class. Humanities credit, no papers. Wonderful. Now I should say a little bit about what logic is. And I always find that that's not especially helpful. It's a bit like explaining what math is. Logic and math have a lot in common. Now, if you're a bit of a math phobe, don't run screaming from the room at that comparison, because there are differences too, and some people who are not great at math excel at logic. But in general, they're similar in this respect. No papers, and also that the best way to become good at logic is to do lots of examples. Logic, like math, is kind of a skill that you acquire by doing, doing in practice. And for that reason, it doesn't help that much to tell you what logic is, because it's not going to make all that much sense to you because you haven't done it yet. I mean, one thing I always do is I show you this page from the book, from the textbook. This is page 446. What the hell is that? You have no idea. Well, you will, but if you make it to the end of the class, as I hope the vast majority of you will. I mean, what are all these symbols here? What's this backwards E business? What's this business? What are these letters, EI, UI? What the hell do they mean? You have no clue. But as I said, when you get to the end of the class, this will make sense. This is an example of a proof in predicate logic, which is what you will be able to do by the time the final rolls around. Now, the other way in which math and logic are similar is that although there are some areas that we will cover that are kind of self-contained, so that if you miss that week, you just won't be able to do that section, but you'll be able to do everything else. Certainly by the time we reach the midterm, it's all building on what came before. Which means that if you miss one part, you're screwed, right? Because you won't, if you come back the next week and you don't understand the stuff that went before, you won't understand the stuff we're doing now, because it builds on it. So try not to skip classes. You can skip classes if you read the textbook and it comes easily to you. I have had, not many, but I have had people who stopped showing up and they all did the best. I only saw them when they came in and sat down and did the exams, and they did great. Clearly they were logical geniuses. If this is not you, then I think you will benefit from being in class and doing exercises and being able to ask questions. So I advise you to come to class. I don't keep roll. I have to remember to take roll today just to see if I know who you are. I will do this though. I will have a seating chart. So next class, next Monday, I will set up a seating chart so that the chair that you are sitting in that day will be your chair for the rest of the semester. So if you hate the chair you're sitting in now, make sure you come early and find a chair that you like. The reason I do this is, first of all, it helps me to learn who you are, and second, later on in the class when we're doing proofs, it's just a lot quicker if I can just put them in stacks because I know who everyone is in the row and I can just hand them back quickly. So I will know if you're missing, but your grade won't be affected by that. I don't keep roll, I don't make attendance part of the grade. I just think that you probably won't do as well if you don't come to class. A couple of general things that can be said about logic. The study of logic has been around since the ancient Greeks. In particular, Aristotle, one of the big three ancient Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Aristotle basically was the first person to write down some of the most important rules of logic. And some of the, at least a large chunk of the stuff we'll be doing before the midterm dates back to the ancient Greeks, over 2,000 years. So, and of course they spoke a language that was very different from ours, but it doesn't matter. Because essentially logic is, in one way of looking at it, the rules of thought, and in particular, the rules of argumentation. Now when we talk about arguments in philosophy, we're not talking about disagreements, arguments that involve throwing things and swearing. We're talking about arguments more in the sense that you find in, say, a courtroom where lawyers present arguments or present their case. An argument is something where you're trying to prove something and you're trying to prove it by supporting it with evidence. Now, the evidence has to be relevant to the conclusion. And the way in which it is relevant is largely the study of logic. So when you learn how to do logic, I think that it is actually empowering. For a couple of reasons. One reason is you can become more confident in the things you believe. One thing I would say is people tend to say they have a right to their opinion. Well, they don't. In this class, as in philosophy in general, I think a better slogan is, an opinion is a privilege and not a right. In other words, you only are entitled to your opinion if you can support it. You can't just say, well, that's what I believe. That's not good enough, particularly when it comes to important matters, which we study in philosophy all the time. You have to be able to argue for your position. You have to be able to show that it is consistent with positions that normal people would hold or that you hold. So once you learn to do that, you can have more confidence in your beliefs. And you can feel less threatened by people criticizing you. Philosophers, sadly, don't tend to be very popular, partly because we are viewed as rather argumentative in the bad sense. I remember the ex-dean came to one of our department meetings once, and at the end of the department meeting that we all thought went great and went just as normal, we said, well, what did you think? And he was sort of kind of pale-faced and shaking, and he said, are they always like this? You just argue all the time. And we thought it was perfectly acceptable, because we would disagree with each other, but one person would convince the other person, and there was no harm done. That we view as ideal. An ideal situation is one where your view can be criticized, and you are open to giving up your view if it is shown to you that your view cannot be supported, but also you are able to defend your view with reasons. If you can't do that, it's very threatening when someone attacks your view. It's as if it's an attack on you. But I think when you become good at logical reasoning, you become more confident in your views on the one hand, but also, perhaps paradoxically, more ready to give them up. Because you only hold those views because you think they're well supported. And if somebody provides you with evidence that they're not well supported, you can say, oh, okay, well, I'll hold a different view instead. And that is, I think, more intellectually honest. The other way in which it's empowering is that you are less easy to be bullshitted, if that's a verb. People are always arguing for things that you should believe. Political positions, advertisers are always presenting arguments that you should do this, people are always trying to convince you of stuff. And if you don't understand how the rules of argument work, you don't know what to believe. You are buffeted from all sides and you have to just pick up random. Whereas if you understand how argument works, you can see when people are arguing badly, and you can say, well, I don't have to believe that person because that's a ludicrous argument. Whereas that one argued for their position more strongly, that's obviously the way to go. So I think logic is a very good thing, a very important thing to be good at. Some people discover that they're naturally talented at it. In this respect, it's a bit like language. I think it has a lot in common. If you don't like the math analogy, try the language analogy. Because language, too, you get better at it by practicing it. But some people just have a natural affinity for it. Some people can learn lots of languages like that. Some people discover that they are naturally logical thinkers, and it's kind of great to you say, well, great, this is where I should be. This is the skill that I have. Other people really struggle with it. But at the same time, I once had a vet from Afghanistan come to me at the end of the semester, and he said, I really struggled with this, but I think it was worth it because, he'd undergone some trauma in combat, and he said, I find it harder to think clearly after this experience, but this was a good practice for me. It's made me really look at the way I think, and it's like exercise for the brain. It's like, brain therapy. Doing this, it helps you structure your thoughts. So that's my selling point for logic. As I say at the end, it's a boot camp for the brain. And even if your brain is flabby and out of shape at the start, if you stick with it, you should have a fitter and sharper brain at the end. The text is this. If you do not have, who does not yet have the text? A mark of shame. Go to the bookstore and get it. It should be cheap because this is not the most recent edition. I thought about, I've been saying for years that they need a new edition, and they finally got a new edition and they charge a fortune for it. So I couldn't, in all honesty, require it because it was just ridiculously expensive. So this should be available fairly cheap. If you don't get it at the bookstore, get it from cheaptextbooks.com or whatever. You can rent it from the bookstore, can't you now? You can, it's just amazing. Even if you're still waiting for yours to arrive, or you were mugged and you have no money and can't afford a textbook, good news. Well, after the mugging. It's when I finally set this up right, there should be a button that says textbook. Yes, leave this page. And it will include scans of the chapters we're using in this course. They're not necessarily particularly good scans, and they don't have the answers in the back, which are useful to check your work, to see how well you're doing. So I wouldn't suggest that this is a replacement for owning the textbook. Don't think, cha-ching, I've just saved plenty of money by doing this, because I will require you to bring it to class, and if you print this sucker out, you'll probably spend as much in toner cartridge as you would in buying the textbook. But it is there if you're waiting for your textbook to arrive or something like that. Or it will be there when I've fixed Blackboard. One more thing, handouts. These are a bunch of things that I've done over the years that supplement the material in the textbook when it is tricky or when I want to summarize it neatly. The first one of these is diagramming arguments, which we'll get to, if not next class, then the one after that, and then right all the way up to symbolizing with overlapping quantifiers, which is very colorful. And it ends up with stuff that looks like this, which, again, you don't understand yet, but it will become clear when we get there. So you won't need that handout for a while. But I don't want to be welcomed to Chrome. Oh, this is interesting. Logic Tutor. This is something that looks like a MySpace page or something, because it dates back to the 90s probably, but it still works fine. And it is set up by the publishers of the textbook, and it mimics the structure of the textbook entirely. So, for example, we're working on classification today. That's the name of chapter 2, and these are the sections of chapter 2. So each of these you click on here, and it gives you a little tutorial. So you can see whether or not you understood the reading. Something that represents classes of things that have to be grouped together is called a concept. Correct. Phew. Wouldn't have looked bad if I got that wrong. I'm not going to risk any more questions just in case. But anyway, you can go through. It's not for any score or anything. It just tells you whether or not you understood it. So that'll be available online as well. When you flip, before we finish with this, classroom etiquette. All electronics are banned. In the course of teaching this class, which I've been doing for more years than I care to remember, it has become increasingly common for people to be distracted by their phones or their laptops or their tablets or some combination of the three. And often I think that today's youth, of which you are examples, don't know that this is happening. It's like scratching. It's something you do without even thinking about it. Your phone buzzes and you have to look at it. But I think this is a class where you've got to force yourself to pay attention. You can't really coast, because if you miss something important, it's going to undermine everything else. So I am going to say that all electronics are banned. Another reason for doing this is, as I've caught people cheating on tests by looking at their phones. So you're not allowed to use your phone in this. If you have a relative who might lapse into a diabetic coma at some point, then fine, you can keep your phone on in your pocket. But other than that, please turn your phone off and remain phone-free for an hour and a quarter. Also laptop-free. I don't see anyone with a laptop, but sometimes people claim they can only take notes on their laptop. Well, too bad. You learn how to use this technology in this class. That's another thing. Please do take notes. It is a lost art. That's another thing I've observed over the years I've been teaching. Fewer and fewer people take notes. And it is a valuable thing. They've done studies where you are more likely to remember something if you write it down. The very act of moving your hand in a writing motion causes wrinkles to form in your brain that otherwise would not form. You may think that it's, my pearls of wisdom are such obvious pearls that they will lodge in your brain automatically. But sadly, this is not true. And you need to take notes because this is important stuff. And also you'll need a pen and paper because we're going to be doing exercises, a lot of which require that. So make sure you've got those. So don't look at your phone, don't look at your laptop or any of that stuff. Welcome to the 19th century. Oh, and one absolutely vital, important rule, no knuckle cracking. I hate that. If you do this, you fail the class instantly. That is gross. All right. over the page, we have a schedule of readings. These are readings I want you to have done before the class starts. So, you're already behind, because you should have read pages 11 to 16 for this class, and you didn't, did you? But I'll let you off, because you didn't have the syllabus. However, for next time, for Monday, September 8th, I want you to have read at least as far as page 44 in the textbook. The reason why I want you to read ahead is so that if there's a part of the textbook that's not as clear as you'd like it to be, or you tried you don't have to do the quizzes because we'll do the important ones in class, but if you do try one just to see if you understand it and you didn't get it right, well, you can ask a question about that in class. So you are better prepared. Now, if you look at the breakdown of readings, you'll see that by the midterm, we've gone as far as chapter 10. But then after the midterm, we just do chapters 12, 13, and 14. So moving a lot slower. And some of the time, if you look on, for example, week 12, Monday, you have to read one page. That's not too stressful. Why the difference? Well, the answer is because the early stuff is pretty easy. There's a lot of it, though. The difference between the midterm and the final is the midterm, you're forced to remember a lot of stuff. If you remember the stuff, it's fairly straightforward. But there's just, a lot of it to remember. Whereas for the final, you don't have to remember as much, but it's harder stuff. You are actually doing things like proofs, like one of the ones I showed you, and that requires more intellectual effort, which is why we move much more slowly through those chapters. So if you like, the midterm is kind of broad but shallow, whereas the final is more narrow but deep, if that makes any sense. That is the way the class breaks down. So hang on to this syllabus. Keep a copy tucked in your textbook or whatever, because you need to refer to the schedule of readings.